get bigger and expand, it'll be more stuff that we can take there. But usually if somebody needs the stitches, they don't call the ambulance to get hauled out there. But there's certain things that we'll take there and other things we won't. Just, as their cardiac stuff gets better there, then we'll probably be able to take some of that there. So it's kind of up and down. Some will go there, but most of it will still go to the St. George.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have a question? Afton, do you have anything? Or are you good?
Can you hear me?
We
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, yeah, I have my report.
Go ahead.
Okay, on the financial report, Keddington and Christensen came down and they performed our on-site annual pre-audit assessment. We received really positive feedback. We completed all of the items from last year, including separation of duties, fraud risk assessment, establishing procedures for the disposal of capital assets, increasing cyber security and IT, and they will be back in October for our final audit. So we should be able to, and then it will take them a couple months to prepare that report. So we'll have our audit findings by the end of the year. At this time, 25% of the year has elapsed. We've spent 19.27% of the budget. We are working on some grants. Tokerville City received our FEMA BRIC grant that we had applied for. We've been working on this for about 8 months now, but we got that in the amount of $38,000 that came through this week, our approval on that. So that's for the erosion hazard study to help us clean out Ash Creek and Laverkin Creek. I went to Cedar City and I met with the governor's office of economic opportunity and development. I met with 2 people there, and then again in Tokerville, had a couple of other meetings with them. They reviewed our grant application for a water tank out on and an associated pump house out on the west side of the city. That's a $4.5 million grant for application for a 2 million gallon tank. And I'm meeting with them again. I've had another meeting with them where we've started applying for 3 additional rural infrastructure grants. And those will be about $200,000 for one, another $150,000 for another. And then we're working on actually a multi-year grant, several $1 million. And those grants the first will address roads, the second will address water. And the ongoing 3 to 5 year plan is to take the power lines along Toker Boulevard underground. So starting that, we've got to apply for that, years in advance. So we think that's about a 3 to 5 year project. So just working on those. And then the community report, working on the Westfield Park. The fencing has been going up. We've got that restroom design moving forward. The landscape design is almost done. We're still set to bid that out and begin construction in September. They finished up on the TRE Frisbee golf course. So those signs should all be installed and you should be able to go out there and play Frisbee golf. Tokerville Parkway Phase A, that's being closed out. We've done that walkthrough. Phase B is still obviously under construction. We are addressing concerns about dust, rocks on the roadway and traffic speeds near TRE and Choya. The paving and filling potholes at Anderson Junction is complete. We did that project a couple weeks ago. One other point of interest would be that there was an off-road and OHV grant that was applied for by members of Washington County and by the county, and then in conjunction with some other cities on our side. And that grant was a request from the state for $660,000. This affects Tokerville because this was applied for to widen the road to Tokerville Falls. They wanted to rehab that road all the way to the falls and all the way to the communication towers. Tokerville City, we participated in those discussions, but we did not issue a letter of support for that project. That grant has received preliminary approval. I followed up on that. The second phase is going to be continuing a discussion about a possible staging up there, a staging area. So I'll keep you up to date, and we'll keep an eye on that and just see if they've received the preliminary approval. We'll see if they receive the final approval for that grant. And then one other thing just on code enforcement, we've got to have council review that. We've been working on that with legal. And after the council reviews that, hopefully we'll be announcing our code enforcement officer at the next city council meeting. So that's progress. And then on economic growth, the general plan, we'll have a draft of that. The draft is going to have a public hearing at Planning Commission in September. So that's exciting, getting closer all the time. And then our web design, we're set to have that on September 15th, go live. And then obviously Ruth and I are up at the Utah League of Cities and Towns. It's been really interesting today. The topics the main topics are affordable housing, land use, general plans, infrastructure programs being introduced by the state. We attended a Guiding Our Growth, which is from the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. That included a survey that they did statewide with 29,000 responses. They're going to go through the data tomorrow, and it'll formally be available later in September. Those questions on the survey included like desired growth and where people wanted to see it. They talked about accessory dwelling units, mixed density, and the preliminary data was showing that 60% of people wanted some growth, including a mix of residential and commercial, and 19% wanted zero growth at all. So that was kind of the findings of that. We'll learn more tomorrow and bring that info back, but that's kind of what I have for the report for right now.
All right, thank you. Anybody have a question for Afton at this point?
What was she saying about the Logan Falls and the?
Oh, somebody- Yeah, somebody got a grant. They were trying to get a grant for $660,000 to help improve the road.
Off-road club. We
Yeah.
got that.
Yeah, they got a preliminary approval, but there's a lot of stuff to go through
Well, in the
before
city,
we even
Right.
get to.
and I think, Mayor, the important thing, we talked about it as a council. Afton presented it to us, and then we did not write a letter of support for it.
Yeah.
We have a lot of concerns.
There's a
yes.
lot of
Correct.
concerns.
I don't know how they get the trailers up there. They're getting them up there.
Yeah, and just driving up to the water tank is just that far is hard to get there. And that's just the beginning. And there's just a lot of problems with Springs Drive, and we just,
I feel for those guys that need to go to the tower and work on it, but
yeah. So,
And the data that they presented in that meeting, which we went through with council, was that there were about 78,000 people
yeah.
that visited Tokerville Falls last year alone, 28,000 vehicles. And they estimate that number will grow this year. So that's,
toll booth, well, we've talked about it, but
I was thinking of a gate with a lock.
gate with a lock,
Gate with a code for the citizens. of
maybe
Oakland.
a dam right below the falls and make a reservoir, but then that'll, want them to go up there for that anyway, so that's not gonna help. So, okay, thank you, Afton.
thank you.
All right, we're gonna move into our public forum session of our meeting here. If anybody wants to get up and speak about something that's not on our agenda, you have 3 minutes. Please state your name and your address.
My name is Ray Benz. I live at 370 West Shangri-La here in Tokerville. And I've noticed on our calendar, we don't have, this coming Thursday, we have a community readiness meeting, and it's not on the calendar. We've been told that we would have signs out there that would advertise that, and that the churches would be notified in their bulletins. We were counting on that the people in the community will do that, and we tried to put together a nice presentation.
We'll get some signs that say, we'll get the flasher saying it's on the 14th.
Right, this is the 14th at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, 7 PM.
Okay, and we hope that the entire city council will be there and support this project that we're working on, or this.
I don't know if the whole city council can be there unless we publish it as a public meeting.
Chance meeting.
We probably.
Yeah, I don't know. How does that work? Attorney? No?
We're not making any decisions there. It could be a
It'll be
chance
okay.
meeting
Okay.
if you show up.
Perfect.
Okay, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ray. We'll get stuff set up and notified. Does anyone else have anything? All right, not to be great, but great. All right, we're gonna move on to item G, section G of our meeting. First item G1, discuss on Tokerville City Park policies and procedures. This is, we don't really have an ordinance that talks about our parks and procedures, or our procedures at the parks. So this is where we basically need to ask staff to go through, and we have a few signs, but actually make ordinance saying, these are our hours, this is what we allow and we don't allow at our parks. So Riker, this will be up to you. So let's get us something written. If everybody agrees, we good on?
Yeah, I brought this forward kind of,
Yeah.
I talked with Riker. So just some of the stuff quickly to consider as you're looking at the sign up there. what the heck does number 4 mean? And who's it apply to? And
Your parents have got to be here to surprise.
mine do? Okay,
Yes,
all right,
yes.
good. Okay.
Just for riffraff. Other than that, we're good.
All right, so that's probably something that needs to be addressed. Number 6, I don't think we have any chain link fences, at least in TRE.
Yeah, we have them over on.
Do we have the other one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Come in
Okay.
We'll probably end up with more of them in
Okay.
the other parks.
Other stuff, and I don't know, it's up to the council and I guess Riker and and our citizens and what they think, but other thoughts that I had were with our hours, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. I talked to Riker about it, but would it be more prudent to do something like dusk to dawn, or half an hour before dusk, half an hour after dawn, or something like that?
Well, I don't-
Because
yeah.
in the wintertime, the sun goes down at what, 6 o'clock? So are there reasons? I mean, I don't want to be a nanny city or
Movies,
anything like
movies in the
that,
park. You can't do it till it's dark.
but- Okay, do we have that?
We
Okay.
people have done that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just asking and
Yeah.
throwing that out there. Because what are you going to do at 10 o'clock at night in the middle of winter at the park?
How old am I at the time? I mean,
Huh?
never mind.
Yeah. So, so that's another one. Do we want to make sure somehow that we prohibit overnight camping or parking in
Yes,
the park?
definitely.
So that's something else that we should add there. I don't know what the council's feeling is on fires, barbecues, charcoal barbecues. That might be something else that we want to look at or address. I mean,
Yeah, I think you're right. We need to provide those.
Oh.
That's my opinion.
yeah, to
You know,
put,
provide a charcoal barbecue they can use and we know it's safe.
yeah,
It's
and then they
not-
can just.
They can't
leave
use
that-
their
and They
own.
can just leave
you
the
know.
charcoal in
Yeah.
there.
We could.
But I mean,
Dump it in
Yeah.
the trash can.
yeah,
So
dump them in the trash can.
While they're hot,
Exactly.
while they're hot.
But
Have the
anyway,
fire
those are-
department do something.
Yeah. So those are kind of some of the stuff. I know we allow fireworks on certain days. We want to put no fireworks the rest of the time on the ordinance sign.
Yeah.
And then also, do we want to put, who's going to enforce this stuff? So once we get it to a code or an ordinance.
Right, that's what we
then
have
it
to
would be
do.
the sheriff, right?
Would be, well,
so-
our code enforcement and or
Enforcement.
Yeah.
or the sheriff, depending if it's criminal, right off the bat. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So-
Yeah, so, yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
I just think we need to get these guys working on it, and then they'll bring us back an ordinance, and we can discuss it and modify it, tweak it, and.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
all right, we good on that one?
Yep.
All right,
Yep.
business G2, discuss on Title 6, Chapter 2, time limited parking to address the consecutive parking time.
Okay.
So-
So this is another one that I brought
Yeah,
as we're working on our codes and stuff.
we have a 96-hour policy right now, if I believe. Yeah, 96 hours.
So in addition to this, so 96 hours, I mean, how do you enforce 96 hours? Somebody parks something in front of your house for 96 hours. I got to wait and then call the sheriff and they come out and they go another 96 hours before they can do anything?
No,
No?
no, it's a consecutive 96 hours if it can be documented and
Picture.
Okay. Okay.
that it's been parked there for 96 hours, then they can
And then-
decide for it immediately.
The sheriff can cite it immediately?
If he's provided evidence.
Okay. All right. Just, I'm not sure if we want to shorten that time. Laverkin uses 48 hours, so that's something to consider. The other thing, as I was looking into this and talking with Riker, and jump in here, Riker, we don't prohibit RV parking, semi-truck and trailer parking, commercial vehicle parking, trailers and stuff on city streets. So I'm not sure if that's something else that the council wants to address and the residents are interested in something like that. Again, I don't want to be a nanny city. Again, I don't want to prevent people from parking RVs in front of their homes when they're loading them up, detailing them, whatever. Or if we have family come in to visit and they have an RV and want to park it out in front of your house, that might be something that we'd have to address or look at too. But those are
Yeah.
some of the,
I know I
Concerns.
think there was some talk today from the state about parking on the street. I'm not sure. Afton, do you have, they talk about that a little bit up there?
Say it again.
The parking on the streets from the state, they've got some new guidelines possibly. Street
Yeah,
parking.
we were actually talking about that today in one of the sessions. They were saying that the state is trying to come up with them, just trying to limit parking. They were trying to address, parking on the street, sizes of driveways, roadways. They're going to present the finals on that tomorrow of what the state is thinking. they're trying to address it from like electric vehicle standpoint and, all sorts of things. So that's what they're going to be talking about tomorrow.
Okay,
So,
appreciate the
Yeah, I
background.
would tell you more about that. And I can get with Riker as he tries to go through the ordinance too. I checked with Ruth and she was thinking from when she was the recorder, she was thinking that there actually is something in code that says that it is prohibited.
There is,
On-
I'm trying to find it.
Yeah, you
Ruth,
know,
yeah, Ruth was saying she thought
Riker and
she
I
was the
both,
recorder that was in there.
Riker and
That
I
it- that
both
it already is in
researched
code.
this, Afton, Riker and I both researched this in our code, and we could not find it anywhere. And that was one of the
Yeah.
reasons I sent that email to you, Heath, originally. And I could not
She
find it,
was-
and I don't believe Riker could find it either.
Yeah, and I looked through it too, and I couldn't find it, but I checked with Ruth, and she was thinking that it is in there somewhere. So we were gonna do one other search and just get back with you too, and just double check again.
Okay.
But yeah, we couldn't find it either, but she was thinking it was in there.
All right,
So yeah, we can check again, because if you want us to look into some more of this in code, but she was thinking that it was prohibited. So we'll keep looking into it.
Honestly, I think I remember having that conversation. As a
Mhm.
council and making a motion on that.
Right, I do too.
Okay.
So, yeah, so let's we'll direct staff to find out and kind of, if we don't have
Okay.
something, get it drafted and we can look at it in ordinance form.
Thanks.
All right, any more questions on this?
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for bringing it up. All right, discussion on an updated Tocqueville City logo. Daisy, you want to bring those up? We've talked about this. We tabled the item. There was a lot of concern about just changing just for change. We have several different options. We even had a third party say, hey, let us give it a stab for free. We'll maybe come up with some ideas. I love our city logo, the one we have now, but it is definitely busy. I think, we talked about keeping that as a token, or as our seal, the city seal, and then maybe doing something simple for letterhead, shirts, a few things like that for our guys. I know the other logo is great, but when you've ever seen it in a small little, it's hard to read, it's hard to see. But this is up to you guys for thoughts and ideas. Anyways, what do you guys?
I would say, Mayor, this is something that we need to print some of these off, present them, have citizens come in and look at them.
Okay.
Let's not cram it down our citizens' face like we did the state flag.
Okay,
So,
have some public hearings and do maybe an open house and see what people think and get feedback.
yeah, because I can tell, like Afton, I've looked through this.
I love
I think some of these are really nice. I just don't know if our
Okay.
citizens are wanting to change it, but
Okay,
I really liked what was in here. There were some really creative ideas that looked good. So I would be way
Okay.
in favor of showing them to the citizens and letting them give us some feedback and then move from there.
let's do it. Yeah, we can
That's
do
a
an
great
open house
idea.
and stuff. Okay,
Everybody, we're good with that? Perfect. So staff, there's another job to do. Got nothing else
okay,
going
thank
on.
you.
All right, we are going to move on to item G4, discuss and possible action on resolution 2023 Constitution Week proclamation. So this is the same thing we do every week, or every year, I should say. The daughters, I think, of the revolution usually bring
Yeah.
this to us. This is nothing, I mean, it's great. I love the Constitution. I wish more people knew what it said. So we definitely want to support our Constitutional Week proclamation. So if there's any more needed discussion on that, or I'm willing to take a motion.
So moved, Mayor.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, beautiful. Action G5, discuss and possible action on resolution 2023 Washington County Water Conservancy District landscape standards. So we've been round and round and round. I used to remember this was like a 14 or 15 page document. We're now down to 4 pages. They've changed a lot of stuff. I mean, they've made a lot of things. It was just too heavy handed the first time. A lot of cities fought back. So this is a much cleaner, easier. The standards are not as high. If you guys haven't looked at it, I should recommend you do. We're the last city in the pooling agreement to approve this. Either our water efficiency, this landscape standard.
So Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah, so the mayor and I, we've attended several meetings about this. Darren's gone to some also. The water district originally asked all of the members of the pooling agreement to just come up with their own landscape ordinance. They had given us, like he said, a big, long document to try to comply with. They went back through, they found out that every city was submitting a different document, a different ordinance. So they went back through, the board, the Water District Board came up with their new water efficient standards. Their board passed them, they approved them. Then they went back and they amended the requirements to get the landscape, the rebate for ripping out your grass. You can get the cash rebate. So now what they're asking is that now that all of the cities have received the new efficient standards, now they're asking for Tokerville City to go back through and create a landscape ordinance that somewhat complies with these standards so that our residents can get that. And so we just would be asking for council just to give us direction to start the process to create a landscape ordinance. Like the mayor said, we're the last city to do a landscape ordinance. We're the only city that has not done one. We did that intentionally. We wanted to see what the new standards were before passing an ordinance. So that would be the request, would be just get direction to start the process of getting a landscape ordinance in place.
So, and just, I don't know if anybody knows about the water or the grass buyback. The water district's actually giving, I think, $2 a square foot if you want to rip
Yeah.
out your grass and replace it with desert landscaping. So.
But if you live in
Yeah, go
you
ahead.
have, you have to live in a municipality that has
That
passed
has-
a land
Right, they
ordinance that
won't,
matches those efficiency standards.
yep. Darren, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to we do have a landscape ordinance right now,
We
but
do.
like Afton said, we've been holding off to change that to see what the water district came up
Yeah.
with. So
So the question is, we need to have staff change our ordinance to match this. So our citizens can apply for that grass buyback if they would so choose to. Right now, they can rip the grass out, but the water district's not gonna give them any money. So, but there's other things in here that we need to look at. The original plan was a lot. They want to tell you what kind of plants and what kind of sprinklers, and this has been really changed so it's not as, authoritarianism on it. So we have more control over that kind of stuff. So it's up to you guys to decide if we're going to have the city.
If we, and this may be more of a question for Heath, but if we adopt this resolution saying we're going to comply with the standards,
Right.
will the citizens get the rebate, or do we have to have?
We
that
have
in-
to.
You're not being asked to adopt the
Well,
resolution.
I'm just asking, I'm
This is
asking if we
But-
did.
But if you read the actual resolution that the district passed modifying this rebate program for water efficiency landscape rebate program, it says participation in the water efficient landscape rebate program is limited to applications for properties in communities that have adopted water efficiency ordinances that comply with the water efficiency standards adopted by the board on August 7th, 2023. So you have to adopt their standards. Now, we can, in ordinance form, we can, in that ordinance, probably go
Right.
above and beyond. But these are minimum, that's the minimum standards have to be in there.
Right.
So.
right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked before, and maybe Afton can help me with this, but we talked about before omitting along Toker Boulevard, the houses and stuff from this
Agricultural.
water
So-
requirement. So how would that?
This is for new construction only, I believe.
That is correct.
Yeah, this is for
Okay.
only new construction.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
How's
Yeah.
it for new
Yep.
construction if you're going to get paid to rip your lawn out?
Well, you can volunteer.
So you can,
Yeah,
That's
you
just
can-
the rebate program.
That's just a rebate program.
you can volunteer in the existing part of town to take
Exactly. Yep.
your grass out
Yep.
and be more compliant.
Okay.
But this is for new construction only. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Right.
so I guess, do we need an action to say that we,
I think probably just the council.
Instruction to staff, yeah.
yeah, let's, what do you guys good with it? Having, okay, so
Finish the
staff, once
landscape
again,
ordinance.
let's fix our ordinance for our landscaping ordinance to comply with the Washington County Water Conservancy District's
Hasn't
uh,
planning
landscape
commission already seen
standards.
that a few times too?
Oh, we've changed it.
Planning commission
Moved it.
has.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these standards are way,
Much more streamlined.
I don't want to say, I don't want to, exactly, streamlined. I was like, I don't want to make it easier, but
Thank you,
yeah, they don't
Brendan.
say things
Thanks,
about what water heater to buy or anything like that. So it's, so we'll get an ordinance drafted and back in front of planning commission and then the council,
Okay.
if that's where the right direction.
I
Okay.
think so. I think we're good there. Yep. Let's carry on with that.
Okay.
All right, item G6, discuss and possible action on adopting a memorandum of understanding between Washington County Water Conservancy District for the transparent billing grant with Yapify. So this is a billing system that will do all the water and basically in the county. This is, once again, all the other cities are doing this. We have a billing, transparency billing. So we can see the count or the district can see what we're billing on our water, our usages, our citizens' usage. But this is a nice system that we can use as they're talking about it'll save like 6,000 acre feet of water. The way we can kind of watch how much water is being used, notification if somebody has a leak. Very similar to our Badger, but this gives us the opportunity to do mass communications with our citizens here in Tocqueville without, we can send them a flash email or text or something with this system that we can't currently do right now. So there's a lot of good things about this. It's a 3-year plan. It's not going to cost the city any money. The water district is applying for the grant. They just need all the cities that are going to be participating to have an MOU with them saying we're in with it. So Afton can explain probably a lot better than I can on some of the stuff.
Yeah, we've attended several meetings with the water district about this, and the software is called Yapify. And the MOU, in that memorandum of understanding, Yapify is a software that will allow you to do drought messaging. You can do your utility operations. You could do emergency response on there. You could do water conservation. It'll tell you like high water users or things like that. And then you can do customer service through it. It allows them to send you can do a website notice, a chat, an email, a text, a phone call, or a postcard. And like an example of what this would have been is when TSWS had trouble with that engine, and at their pump house, they had trouble with the engine, and we were offline for 3 days. Instead of citizens calling us and saying, hey, we need you to call the water district, with this Yapify software, we could have immediately notified all Tocqueville city residents, regardless of if they were ag users or regular. So it allows us to get information to all Tocqueville citizens. Like the mayor said, this is a grant that the district is applying for. It's for 3 years, 15%. The 15% match is going to be paid for by Washington County Water Conservancy District. The other is being done by the state of Utah, the other 85%. And in that, this software will run for 3 years. At the end of it, what Tocqueville, outside of being able to message and doing all of that, cooperating with them, we will share data with them of, our water usage for the last 3 years and things like that, and keep them updated. But we have control over what goes out to our residents. The district does not have any control over that. We have control of what we use this software for. But the main thing for Tocqueville is at the end of it, it gives us the data analytics for TSWS. And then obviously our own, and it's data that if we tried to get that data and run these studies to see when we need to do rate increases or how, what we've been having in leaks and how much we've lost, a lot of those analytics will come from this Yapify software. Again, like the mayor said, we've gone to lots of meetings about this. Tocqueville is the only city that has not signed this MOU yet. In order for the water district to apply for this grant, they do need 100% participation from cities. So their ask is for us to, support them in securing this transparent billing grant. So that's what's before you. It's that MOU. So,
Any questions?
I have one.
Yes.
One point of concern, and I've looked at the
Okay.
memorandum of understanding. By doing this and going on this system, we are giving Big Brother access to all of our data. The Conservancy District, of whom we have certain obligations to that district under a regional water supply agreement for compliance. And I would just hate to see, it doesn't say anything in here that if they have the ability to basically confirm and look whether there's compliance or anything like that. I'd hate to see us fall into bad graces under that agreement, which is critical to, it is right now our planned source for future water, other than what we have in our existing water portfolio. And if we become in breach of that agreement, it could be, not saying that we are, not saying that we will, or anything like that, but it will clearly set the table and pull back the curtain to everything within our water system to the district. So
You pretty much know it anyway, don't they?
Yeah.
in a lot of ways they can, because we share wells and things like that, and there's meters on them, and they can assume because they meter as soon as it leaves our city and when it starts out of the spring and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's more refined data, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just, we just have to acknowledge
Right.
that we're letting mom and dad know where we're at on the weekend.
And it's midnight,
You're in the city park.
city park. God's after me.
Sending you home.
This isn't an app, right? It's,
And-
No, it's
Okay.
it's an internal software for the cities and the other
Okay.
municipalities. Yeah.
okay. So it's not gonna, it's not-
Right, and it's also important just to know that nothing gets shared out of Yopify without our consent.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
It's still, I mean, we're still gonna get all the Badger notifications.
Oh, yeah, that's
same
still the
thing. So it's
same.
just-
Yeah,
Same.
Some of
we'll
it's
still get
duplicating
those.
what's already being done.
yeah,
through
and
the-
since, in fact,
Okay.
that Badger info will probably go to Yapify. Yeah, Yapify. That's where they'll pull a lot of that information
Okay.
is from our Badger meters. So,
Okay. Is the goal of this to,
the goal is to save water. That's
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
the goal.
well, yeah, I get that.
that
Is
is the
is the
goal.
eventual goal, like some of it has been talked about in the state legislature, I think, where rather than we do a blanket for the amount of fees that we use for the amount of water you use, to actually bill you on the right amount of what you're using rather than a blanket tier? Is that an eventual goal? or-
Well, they want us to have a tiered water rate. They
Which we
want-
kind of do.
We do,
right?
we do. We have a base rate.
Not
and then
kind of,
we do. We absolutely have a tiered rate. Yeah. And that's what they want. They want the people that use the standard amount of water to pay the less. And then the more water you use, you pay more. If you use a whole bunch of water, then you're paying a lot of money.
Right. But,
So, and-
but in that first tier,
right.
do they want it to be actual amounts
Start
used?
at gallon,
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
1,000 gallons.
Other
Yeah.
cities
The
do
tier
that,
starts.
but nobody has
In the
come and said,
In the first phase of this, they're trying to just start getting messages out and really with high water users, start like with them trying to get them to conserve. The first goal is messaging, like mass messaging of saying, hey, you're a high water user. Did you know that? And really seeing what they can conserve. In the MOU, it talks about 6,090 acre feet of water that they think that they'll be able to do through, messaging and things like that. So
And this is both culinary and secondary?
it'll be,
TSWS will be using Yopify too, so we will, assumably, the district will share with us, I mean, since we're a member municipality and partner in
right.
TSWS, share with us their data, and we can do the same analytics on TSWS usage
Is it
as
going
we
to
can as
be,
our systems usage.
will it be so specific that you're actually going to be able to tell water users that are not watering during the proper times
Yeah,
of
it's
day
likely.
and day?
We're already that specific.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
We
we
have
have
the ability to do that already.
Okay.
And
Okay.
another thing that's going to help too is basically the district just came out with a new 20-year plan. This is part of the one of the big elements, or some of the element of the water conservation there's like 5 elements in that whole 20-year plan.
Another aspect to it too is this will allow the district to be able to go out and find different funding sources for projects that they're developing for countywide, which will have a benefit to the city. when they've got the ability to run analytics and data at, the click of a mouse under this program, they can pull up information specific to areas and stuff like that in justification for grants and things like that. And I think that there is some benefit to the district having that information. I'm not saying that it's all bad when mom and dad know where you are, but so I think there is some benefits, and the district looks at that too as saying, hey, this has the ability that we can show. I think I've been told that this would make Washington County probably the most comprehensive as a county of any county in the state with regards to the ability to analyze and document water usage throughout that county, more so than any of our more metro counties in the state.
And that's where a lot of funding comes from. If we can
Yes.
prove that we are conserving and we're doing it the best we can, then we can get funding, grants and stuff. So we need a motion one way or the other on this MOU.
I'm making a motion to approve it.
I have a motion. Second, any further discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Great. We are on item G7, discuss and possible action on resolution 2023, limiting the number of public infrastructure districts, PIDs, within Tocqueville City. So we've talked about, other cities around us that have just gone hog wild on PIDs. We do not want, we have 6 open in the city now. We talked about having some regulations and stipulations on when and where we give out or we approve a PID. So
To give a little more background, I was asked by staff after our last council meeting to see if I could kind of assimilate some of the concerns that were and that council members expressed, see if I could kind of meld that into a comprehensive resolution so that the council, you can see more what we're thinking about. And so the way that it's drafted, there is, the recitals are somewhat important in that it explains that under the PID Act, the municipality has complete discretion whether or not to accept or reject a PID application. And it specifically says that there is no liability to the city for denying a PID application. So we have to appreciate and understand that. We can just say no. And we identify some of the concerns a little bit in the recitals, but what we attempt to do is we make a set of findings, which is kind of summarizing. It says that essentially I boiled them down to 4. And some of it is if there are, it creates long-term burden to the city. PIDs do, in the sense that there is maintenance and replacement obligations that have to be borne by the city on all public infrastructure that gets built under a PID and dedicated to the city. So if public infrastructure growth outpaces city revenues and things like that, and our ability to man and staff and our ability to fund depreciation and replacement and things like that, that could be a problem if everything just too fast. Second idea is that there needs to be, even though these the debt obligations of a PID are separate from the city's, from the city, and it's not a general obligation of the city, it does create a situation where there is, it obligates future residents in certain areas more so than other residents. And whether or not the level of service generated from that infrastructure is the same or not, it would be a shame if a public infrastructure district creates public improvements in an area of town that creates the same level of service as other areas of town, so they're equal, but they're paying significantly more in property tax. Or what if, because they're paying more in property tax, because they're in a PID, they're getting public infrastructure and systems, parks, whatever we're talking about, at a level of service that's higher than other areas. So we're trying to keep, at least what I heard from the council was that there was some concern in keeping equality and level of service. Another issue that could be that there was discussed was the ability to have, if for some reason the city didn't accept the dedication of public infrastructure, and we do have an expert here in the room. Matt Entz here probably helped set up about half of the PIDs in the state of Utah or more. He could tell you, but he knows the statute much better than I do. But there is ability for a PID to continue to own and operate infrastructure. And what you don't want to see happen is where you've got a separate improvement district having the ability to regulate things like, say the infrastructure is a water system or a water subsystem, and they're operating it and they're charging rates and impact fees and things like that. That's different than the city. They're adopting requirements that could be different than what the city requires. And in a lot of ways, through their policies, they're in a sense affecting land. They're essentially promulgating land use regulations when we as the city are the land use authority. It almost creates a two-headed dragon. And there is situations where it's not necessarily a PID operating within a municipality, but they've seen it a lot in special service districts that operate inside municipalities. Up in Utah County, there's a couple of them where the city and the district butt heads on everything, and it's who's got more power to flex. Well, I control all the water here, or you may be the city, but we control the water. Those types of things. So there is a possibility of that. And then the last, trying to think, what was the last thing we put? Just the disparate levels of service. So those are the findings that were put down. So in 2, there's just a simple statement of, based on those findings, the policy of the city is that the establishment of new PIDs within the city should generally be discouraged, and that petitions for establishment of new PIDs should be rejected. However, then you go on to 3, and it identifies some special circumstances that would allow a deviation from that policy. Now, I visited with Matt Entz today. We talked about this, and I would agree with him. We probably need to do a couple of revisions in this section to not make it like a checklist for approval. If they can meet these things, they get approved. That's not what the intent was there. We wanted to identify some reasons why the city might consider these things. For instance, Matt was telling me that some cities have a policy where they don't approve establishment of PIDs for residential, for public improvements for residential development, only for commercial development. And one of the things that we talk about is this going to be, would the development be tax revenue positive for the city and things, or would there be things that would be public infrastructure that would be built as part of the PID that would have a regional benefit beyond just the area of the PID district itself, that other residents within the city could garner a large benefit from? Those types of things are some of the things that we attempted to list there in 3. I probably need to rework some ands and some semicolons and things like that. But
Heath, while you're talking on that, I had made just a couple notes.
sure.
First of all, I like that we tied it to the city's general plan. I think that's good because that's not a checklist thing. It just is the global picture of how it fits. So I thought that was great.
Yep.
I'm not really sure the maximum burden and length of burden that will be placed on future property owners within the PID will be minimal. The only thing that we can control on that, right, is the mill rate. So I was just curious, maybe a little explanation on that. And then on G, it says the long-term plan of the PID applicant is to have the public infrastructure owned, operated, maintained, and replaced by the PID.
Yeah, and
I
that
don't think-
was Matt's point and concern. He says that's not we don't want that. We want to actually, if that's what they're asking for, that would be a reason to
Yeah,
deny it.
because-
But that might look like a reason why we would grant it, and we don't want to
Okay.
promote.
So when I read through, I was just like,
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
doesn't.
that
seem
was
like
that
what-
was one
I
of
had
Matt's
another-
main points.
I had another thought also, is if we granted a PID after they're bonded, they have their funding, that maybe the funds go to the city escrow account and like a Fund 42 or 43, and the city kind of controls the funds instead of, and I don't know if that's, as we're doing our highway project,
So we've,
I don't know how that works, if that's even asking too
Well,
much.
And
or-
some of it would be
I don't know if we
requirements
can
of the bond
actually do that.
issuers. They may or may not allow that, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
This guy's the expert. He's here to
Exactly.
talk
Yeah,
about the
let's-
next
let's get
item,
it
but
from- And maybe I'm just asking too, maybe I'm too big of a brother, I don't know.
No, well, first of all, I just want to say, I actually think what you're doing tonight, looking at this resolution, is prudent. I think it makes sense to think through some of these things because a PID is not a one size fits all solution. It just isn't, you know. They are very popular right now and they make sense in a lot of scenarios, but not in every scenario. So I actually support what you're doing, and I support the comments that Heath has shared. Just for a little bit of context, you know, maybe to toot my own horn a little bit, but the reason that he says we're the expert on this is we represent the PIDs that currently exist in your city. I think we represent all of the PIDs that have been created in Washington County so far, at least the ones that I'm aware of. And across the state, I was just counting today, we're involved in just shy of 50 PIDs across the state of Utah currently. So those are all in various stages of creation and bond issuance and stuff. So we have been very busy with this. And we're trying to take pride in, you know, kind of being a resource for, you know, when somebody wants to know what a PID's all about. So with that background, the question was whether bond funds could be deposited with the city. Typically, the bond requirements are that there is a third-party bond trustee. Yeah, and you're probably familiar with this because it probably works the same way for any time if the city has bonded. There's a third-party bond trustee, which is a bank. They hold the funds as the trustee for the district. And then there's certain criteria that have to be met when the district wants to requisition those funds. Now, that being said, we have with some cities, in fact, with your neighboring city, Hurricane, we have been required to post essentially a performance bond for certain improvements. And in Hurricane City, specifically with the Gateway at Sand Hollow Public Infrastructure District, if you're familiar with that area, the city actually required us to essentially post an escrow bond, cash escrow bond with State Bank in the full amount of the expected improvement costs. And so we had to make those arrangements with the bond trustee, but ultimately we were able to do that. And so, you know, it really depends on the city, what their requirements are. That was one of the things that Hurricane wanted to do so that they would be comfortable that the funds were there and available. So there are some things that we can do on that front. The other thing I'll just comment is, again, I support what you're doing. I think some of the concerns that have been addressed are things that really you have control of when you approve any PIDs. And I'll give you one example. I actually just reviewed, as I was sitting here, I looked at the Pineview PID governing document that was approved by the city when you approved the creation of those 6 PIDs. And at least 2 places in that governing document, it says that the PID is not authorized to own and maintain public infrastructure. And so that's just one example. That governing document is, PID can't change it. The only way to vary from it is to come back to you and get an approval of a variance from that document. So, you know, there's a lot of protection for you in that document in particular. It also sets things like you had mentioned, the maximum mill levy. It also sets things like the cap of, you know, the total amount of debt that the PID can go into by issuing bonds. I mean, really, it can go to any level of detail that you want, and you kind of hold all the cards there because, as Heath pointed out, you have no obligation to approve a PID. So we try to be open about that and, you know, let you know that you can set the parameters. Anyway, I'm happy to answer any of the
Oh, that's
questions.
awesome. That's good,
What
good
is the,
information.
what's the max mill rate?
0.00.
For our bids, for the
For-
6
yeah.
Pineview,
On Pineview, I can double check and tell you if you
I
give
mean,
me a
what is the
second.
max?
I think
the max
it's-
Oh, the
mill rate?
max in the state statute is 15 mils.
15 mil?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any that have gone that high. I'm aware of a couple that have done
I
10.
think
That's a- that's a-
ours is 0.005.
That
or-
sounds right. I know
five.
it's kind of, I know
Yeah, I
it's
think we're
single digits.
1/3 of the max. Is
15
our,
would be a
yeah.
huge.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
big,
For-
yeah. Yeah, and like I said, we have a couple that got approved at 10.
Yeah.
But more typical is in the 3 to 6 range is what we've seen. So
So there was a city maybe that some of the funds weren't going to infrastructure and stuff. It was maybe going toward contractors and business stuff and things like that. So it wasn't specific to the,
Well, I don't think anybody's
Infrastructure, so-
done anything like that. They were just worried about it.
okay, so is there ways to prevent that from happening?
yeah, so there's a process of requisition that the PIDs have to go through to get access to funds. And we do a couple of things to, we typically do a couple of things to put that system into place. One is we typically have the PID enter a reimbursement agreement with the developer so that as the developer builds infrastructure or as the developer's contractors build infrastructure, then the PID can requisition the funds to pay for that. Generally, it has to be signed off on by first of all, the person requesting the funds. Second, an engineer certifying that the improvements that are being paid for are actually, that there's progress being made. And third, a member of the PID board has to sign off on it. And then once we have all those forms and those signatures, we submit them to the bond trustee, and the bond trustee will actually send the funds to the appropriate parties.
The board is made up by,
The PID board is appointed by the city council
Okay.
when the PID is created.
so that would be our
No, it's
fail
not.
safe? No,
It's-
I mean, that would be our checks and balances?
That would be your role to appoint the initial board. The statute is really interesting though, because if you have a PID where there's no registered voters, which is actually pretty typical because we're talking about undeveloped property, the statute actually limits the PID board to either property owners or the officers or agents of property owners. And so you really have a limited pool that you can appoint from. And it basically becomes, the people representing the developer on that board.
Todd, I think what the example he just gave you there, a reimbursement arrangement after the fact is the way that you protect. If you're giving a contractor money to build up front and they don't use it, they use it for other things and the infrastructure doesn't get built, that's a problem. But if the PID has an agreement with a developer, say you go out, you or your contractor go out and build this. Once it's done or partially built, we inspect that it's been done to this percentage. You come and ask, we'll approve, take it to the bond administrator, to the bank, and they'll cut you the check to pay for the portion that's been built. So we're not prepaying and giving money to somebody that may run off.
So we won't have a yacht somewhere that says first draw?
Yeah, right
Okay.
there. There you go.
Well,
I love it.
Okay, and then,
being very serious about that though, I mean, you have one PID that has issued bonds in Tokerville. And so you should be seeing, the tangible results of that PID funding. And I'll just tell you, if you ever see a problem or a concern, I hope that we would be one of your first calls. I mean, your city attorney has my cell number. We are concerned about that. This has become a very important part of our practice, and we want to, we believe that the success of these PIDs is important. So
the idea of what the mayor asked, though, it wouldn't be possible for the city to hold that money and then.
Unless you
distribute
do
it.
like a Hurricane did. Hurricane made them put a performance.
Okay,
Todd, we could make that requirement,
right.
but I would tell you, if that is a requirement for bond purchasers, in order to purchase that PID's bond, they have to agree to that restriction. They may or may not like that. That might undermine the ability to sell that bond or have it purchased out on the open bond market.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay.
I was just a question.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a good
Yeah,
question.
absolutely. And then if a developer does the PID, they get the money, they start building the infrastructure, and for some reason they go bankrupt, then what happens?
Also a great question. So the first thing I'll say is that the financial structure that we've been talking about is the first protection against that, right? Because the funds don't belong to the developer. The funds aren't held by the developer. The funds are held by a trustee on behalf of the PID, which is an independent entity. It's an independent public entity, just like Ash Creek Sewer District or Tokerville City. So if a developer goes out of business, gets foreclosed or whatever, our concern and focus on behalf of the PID would be to come back to you and say, hey, we've got new property owners on this project. We need you to help us by appointing a new board that meets the statutory requirements. And then that new board could then pick up where the previous owners left off and continue. And, there could be changes to the project. That would all be dependent upon the entitlement process that you control as the city. But those bonds would remain in place. The funds would remain in place. They wouldn't be affected by a developer bankruptcy. Again, because the PID truly is an independent public local entity. So,
And Todd, if this helps, the PID stays with the land.
Okay.
So whoever the landowner is responsible to pay those PIDs back. So if they don't sell the land to any new homeowners, that's their responsibility to pay that back.
Yeah.
So they want to get it done. They want to get
Or
it built,
or
sell the
bank
homes.
who forecloses on them.
Right.
Or whoever the bank sells to.
Yeah, that PID follows the land. It doesn't come to the city ever. It doesn't ever go to.
that's right.
Yeah, so.
Now, I will say with a PID in a residential development, there is a requirement that at some point the selection of that board transitions from an appointed board to an elected board. And so, for example, in the Pineview PIDs that you have here in Tokerville, I'd have to go and look. It's probably a 5 to 8 year period is provided where the boards are appointed. And then once you have, residents who are registered voters, at some point we have to have a transition over to an elected board, and we haven't had to do that yet in any of our PIDs. It's something that
Still new.
it's still new enough that we haven't done that yet. But when we get to that, we're going to be heavily involved in that process. So.
You can see one on the horizon then.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we're 2 to 3 years in on some of these first ones.
So I think one of the things we talked about on the last thing was that the upsizing reimbursement for using PID funds for, like if the city wants you to upsize to a 12-inch line from an 8-inch line. So this is one of the concerns, which I think you've been involved in that in another city too. So that's one of the points that we talked about last time in the meeting. And if that's allowed and if it's not allowed, and whether Tokerville by resolution is going to allow that to happen, right? So what's your input on that portion?
So I don't know if I can speak to that specific example, but I'll just speak generally. Generally, if you're talking about upsizing of some kind of a system, utility system or whatever, and it's going to serve or benefit the PID area, that would absolutely be permitted.
What if
The reimbursement for the
Under
upsize?
the impact, Utah Impact Fee Act, what if it's considered both a project and a system improvement? Because some of
I see.
the additional capacity is going to provide that utility service outside of the PID area.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the PID Act doesn't distinguish between project and system improvements like the Impact Fee Act does. And so again, I would say still, whether it's a project improvement or a system improvement, it's still eligible to be financed by a PID. The question that becomes relevant is if it's a project improvement or a system improvement, then you have a question of whether it's eligible for impact fee reimbursements or credits.
Right.
Well, if it was paid, like if the upsizing was paid for with the PID funds,
Mhm.
is that eligible for reimbursement? through the contractor because the contractor didn't pay for it. The PID did.
Yeah, so you're probably, I think I understand what you're getting at now. We're having this discussion with Hurricane City
Yes.
just right now. So, so our position is, again, on behalf of the PID, that the PID is entitled to be reimbursed under the Impact Fee Act. And the reason for that,
The PID
Just-
is.
the PID is,
PID.
not the
PID,
developer,
not the
the PID.
developer.
Okay.
The reason for that is if you read the Impact Fee Act, it talks about a developer being entitled to reimbursement if it builds something that would otherwise have been paid for with impact fees. But it does not define the term developer. It doesn't
Developer.
say it has to be a private developer. It doesn't
Or
say
could it be a PID as a developer?
it could be a PID. Now,
That's under the Impact Fee Act.
yeah, that's under the Impact Fee Act. That was in existence before PIDs ever came to be. Now, I'll just, in fairness, Hurricane City and Hurricane City Attorney have a different view. And, you know, we're trying to work through that. So this is frankly, this is part of the fun of having a new thing, you know?
It is, yeah, figuring out
all these new
nuances.
questions.
Thank you, Matt.
So
Yeah.
So do we have a few changes we need to make this? We need to table this and
I have
Go ahead.
I
Oh,
have
go
a
ahead.
quick question.
Afton.
Just Heath, I'm just wondering on 3A where it talks about the general plan.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering on there, I'm just wondering if on there where it says this, where it says in compliance with the city's general plan, I'm wondering if we need to say or current zoning. Because when a zone change happens, the general plan map, right, becomes different. And
Yes.
currently where we have that general plan applicability clause still in there, which they are talking about that up here. They had a conversation today about making general plans non-binding, you know, versus binding.
Yeah, we-
Anyway, but I'm just wondering if there needs to be wording added to that so that it reads, the PID will serve to construct needed and vital public infrastructure to support development plans of the PID applicant that is in compliance with the city's general plan or current zoning for that area of the city.
That's a good question, Afton. I'd have to look at that because current zoning would not override the city's general plan. Now, if there was a rezone after a general plan was adopted, that can be
That's what I'm
construed as an
wondering.
implied amendment to the city's general plan.
Okay,
So
that's why I wondered if
let
it
me-
should say
let
something.
me
I
think
don't know the
about
proper wording,
how we
but
would
maybe
word
something
that.
about current zoning.
Yeah.
So if you'll just look at A and just, I just, because we get into a situation, right, where we have a zone change after, so we're getting ready to adopt our new general plan. And then if there's a zone change that happens, say 6 months from now, that general plan map could potentially not be accurate. The zoning map could, the land use map would be updated. So I don't know if it just needs to say the city's general plan or I don't know the wording. That would be something for you. But I just think there needs to be a way to reference current zoning, just to acknowledge that sometimes that map, that if you were to look at our current general plan, our zoning map is considerably different than the map in the general plan. Right?
Agreed.
So I just think maybe if there's some word on that. The other thing I'm wondering is on G, where we talked about that, about
Yeah,
having the PID do that. I'm wondering if we
poorly
should
worded on my
strike
part.
that,
And
or should we just strike that?
yeah, we could probably, that wouldn't be a
Right.
circumstance that would warrant deviation. That would be a
Okay.
circumstance that would
Didn't cause
further
denial.
justify rejection and denial. So yeah,
Okay.
probably a deletion
So
of G.
we'll strike G.
Yes.
And then I just wondered on the very, very first one, and I think it's just a wording issue on the whereases, the whereas that is, it's the third from the bottom. I
Okay.
think it says, public infrastructure. I think it was just maybe a typo on there where it says the very last line, or needs significant public infrastructure to be installed before, I think that says meaningful.
It meant to be meaningful development,
Yeah,
not
perfect.
meaning.
That's what I thought you had there.
meaningful
So, okay,
development.
great.
Yep.
Those were the only three that I had, was just that meaningful. And then on A, maybe some way to address, just because those two maps are different. So I don't know if it needs to say current zoning map or current land use map. I don't know
Okay.
what you want to put in there, and then striking G.
Yep. Let's,
Okay,
I would probably recommend, Mayor, that since there's enough changes, let's table, bring it back.
what do you want to get all the changes, because I have a couple more that I'd like to discuss. You want to get them
Yeah.
on there
Want
too?
to give them to me or you
Yeah.
want to email them to me?
Well, I think it'd be a good time to
Just
have an
discuss
open
them.
Yeah, let's
discussion
discuss-
item about it,
let's do
because
it. Let's do
another one was, and I don't know how that works on it, because it is like a new thing too, is that it was suggested that we have a list of the items that they want to use the money, the PID for, with like the water tank, the water lines, and the order that they should be put in.
And do you want that to be a special, under the special circumstances where we would allow deviation?
Yeah, I think it would be like a
A
plan,
three-
like a small plan put together for
Kind of-
how they would that be
Joey.
something that's
Matt,
applicable,
you
or-
put these together all the time, like a
Is it?
kind of like
They're in there.
a priority and phasing plan. Doesn't the act require some of that?
The act is pretty open, honestly. And really, we've done this differently in different cities. In Hurricane, we're kind of talking about them, but in Hurricane, they were pretty specific about what they wanted built and how they wanted it prioritized, which is fine. The one issue that's come up with that is in a couple of the PIDs, one in particular that was meant to really finance some pretty significant regional infrastructure, is as soon as the PIDs were created, then the real estate market changed quite significantly. Developer priorities changed, and now we're in a situation where we're trying to have a discussion with the city about, hey, this worked great when we first talked about it. Now it might not work so great. And so that's the only thing I would offer is, the more specific you are, the less flexibility is
It
available
almost
later.
becomes the
So
city stepping into the
Well,
shoes
I
of the
think, like-
developer and market.
The only thing I see is like, hey,
Drivers.
like if you're going to spend for public infrastructure, like what is the public? It doesn't, I don't really.
Agreed.
like,
Maybe
hey,
not
yeah,
sequencing, but
yeah, just
identifying
say,
what
hey,
is going to be
Yeah,
financed
it's
by
going to
it.
be for another water tank or, just
Yeah.
city streets or whatever it is,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, and there's no problem with that. We've done it different ways. Sometimes we've tied it to a development agreement that has specific, requirements for infrastructure. Sometimes it's honestly been as simple as, you're entitled to use this PID to finance any infrastructure that is required for your project as approved by the city, as long as you can dedicate it to an appropriate public entity when it's complete. So, it's kind of a broad spectrum. You can go from
I
very
like the
specific
idea of
to-
listing them and
Yeah.
maybe not
And-
even taking, because even tying it back to a development agreement could be subject to a little bit of interpretation. And then the last example, which is the other end of the spectrum, just wide open, carte
Yeah.
blanche, probably listing and identifying a list, but maybe not the requiring the sequencing
Yeah.
of those things.
Because your plans are
Keith?
going to change, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
After,
And
go
Keith,
ahead.
I was going to say, and one thing that might be helpful if we are going to talk about these and these are going to get tabled too, is that I could meet with each member of council and we could look at the Pineview PID creation documents. Because in there, when it talks about phase one, it actually does list the infrastructure. And then it has anticipated dollar amounts out to the side. That was, I think, done by Matt Entz's office too. And that one is really straightforward and really clear on what infrastructure the city will get. And they can rearrange that. They're allowed to rearrange that or do that, but that is the infrastructure that, that was called
Yeah,
out in those
I'll
creation
look at
documents. So I
that
think that might be
and see if
really
we can
good
craft
for-
something that kind of,
something easy.
Yeah, and I'll
not leave
send
it
those
wide
over to
open.
you. And then I think if council could maybe see those too, because that's kind of what what Joey's talking about seeing those, and Joey's seen the Pineview ones, so I think that's a really good idea.
what's Joey?
Next thing I had was just and I think you briefly touched on it, was a way out of that PID. Like if the developers just say, hey, we're done, we don't want to do this anymore. How do we get out of there? How do we have an end or some kind of mechanism that stops it? Right.
That is
Yeah.
all Matt right there.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's just
You guys
something.
this is great.
Yeah.
These are great questions. So I think the simple answer to that is once the PID is created, you would have to have the consent of the property owners and registered voters, if there are any, to terminate it.
It becomes even more hard once bonds have been issued. You're
Right,
pretty much to the
because
point
you
of no
have-
return at that point.
Well,
Yeah,
I think it's, so the one I'm looking at is, let's say that it never gets issued, right? Like the bonds never get issued. And then it's just
And that-
married to that piece of property,
and-
just a way to
And that's what
disconnect
he's
it.
talking about.
Yeah.
You can-
Yeah. Now, we haven't done this before, but I'll just throw this out there. I mean, I think that you could put some kind of a provision in that if bonds aren't issued within, a specific period
6
of
years,
time,
4 years,
that the
whatever.
city
yeah.
council reserves the right to, I don't know. I haven't,
Put a sunset
I'd have to
clause
look
in
at the statute and see if
Just
that
put
would
a
work.
sunset clause in it.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
kind of a
If it's
sunset
not
clause.
executed in 2 years or 3 years or started, then have it just go away.
Yeah, and I assume something like that would still require the city council to take some formal action, but I mean, I think that's a possibility. Again, I just go back to, we're all familiar with how real estate development goes. Usually takes twice as long and costs twice as much. And, so that's the only thing I would say is, if we impose those kind of limitations, I'd love to see, enough room that there's room for, adjustment to change circumstances. But yeah, I think that could be looked at.
Thank you.
Okay,
That was all
any
mine.
other changes that Heath has? He's got a list now. We had a big list before of it. All right, so I need a motion to table.
Too much information.
Second,
Second.
I have a second. Any more discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Awesome. So going to item number 8 now. Discuss the possible action on a proposed creation of Boulder Ridge Public Infrastructure District located on approximately 80 acres in Anderson Junction.
How can we do that? We got this taken.
Well,
Let's hear
got
it. Let's at least hear the concept.
Yep.
The applicants are recognizing that we're in the process of identifying our policy.
Right.
I'm
So,
gonna turn that over to Matt.
Matt, are you here to speak for Jerry?
Yeah, this is actually why I came,
Yeah.
but I
So
was glad to
we're
be here
getting,
for the
we're getting
other thing.
some free legal advice here, so it sounds like.
Well, I would not
got
substitute
schooled.
my judgment for your good counsel over here. So, yeah, I think you're familiar with Jerry's project and what he's looking to do. I didn't plan a presentation. So I'm not planning on taking a lot of time other than to say, I do think that the project that Jerry is proposing with the commercial focus that it has, the location that it's in, adjacent to the freeway and the freeway interchange. I think this is really makes a lot of sense for this kind of a, public improvement financing. We have submitted a letter of intent along with the petition that's required to be signed by the property owners to request creation of the district. So I'm happy to address any specific questions that you may have. If there's questions about the project, I'd probably defer to Jerry to answer those.
Sure.
But
Willing to give us a draft of your proposed internal governing documents so that we can see some of these very things that we've just been
Yes.
talking about, the
yes,
limitations, the
Yeah.
identified projects and things like that.
in fact, let me just summarize some of the key points
Okay. that would be
because
great.
they are included in the letter of intent that we submitted.
So this has already been submitted to the city.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
this has.
Yeah.
Daisy, can you pull
It's
that-
in your SharePoint
Yeah,
packet.
It
Daisy,
is.
Can you pull that up and then Matt can?
It's not, it won't go up on the
Oh,
screen,
okay.
but it's in your SharePoint.
Yeah, and I'll just hit the highlights.
Is it Exhibit B?
Let's see here. Apologize, I didn't have this pulled up like I should have. Okay, so the proposal is for 5 mills. So, that's in the range that we see fairly commonly across the state. The engineer's estimate for the public improvements that are planned is 4.7 million. And so we've put in there a total debt limit of 7.5 million, which there's a couple of reasons that it's that much higher. One is we usually assume about 20 to 25% additional just for bond issuance costs, as well as an interest reserve and a couple of years of administrative costs, because usually it takes a couple of years for the PID to actually start getting some revenue from property taxes, or at least any significant revenue. And then also just some cushion in there too, if those improvement costs are higher than expected, which we all know is very common. So 5 mills, $7.5 million debt limit. We've also, in the proposal, provided the option to potentially use special assessments, which I don't know how familiar you are with special assessments or special assessment districts. The idea is that instead of a property tax, or frankly, in addition to a property tax, you essentially assess a fixed amount to each property or each parcel. And then that's repayable over, it's amortized and repayable over a 20-year period.
Matt, would you explain the reason why you might do that?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. One, just to be totally frank, in some jurisdictions, a property tax is just politically unpopular. You know, nobody wants to see a property tax, right? And so it's an alternative source of revenue for the PID. It's not as good as a property tax because with a property tax, you can issue a 30-year bond. With assessments, you can only do 20 years, so it limits your financing capacity. Another thing you can do with an assessment is you can actually pay it off early. So it's a fixed amount. You know what it is at any given time. It can be paid off just like you pay off a mortgage or a loan. Whereas a property tax, you can't say, I'm 5 years in, I want to pay in advance the rest of my property taxes so I don't have to pay the rest. So it gives us some flexibility there. We've even had some jurisdictions flirt with the idea, although I'm not aware of any that have actually put this into place. Some have flirted with the idea of telling the developer, you know, you can do an assessment, but it has to be paid off no later than when the building permit is issued, so that the subsequent homeowner doesn't have to, worry about paying on it beyond that. So in that scenario, it becomes kind of a bridge loan, right? Anyway, so there's a lot of different
I think
scenarios.
also in some areas too, if you look at the public infrastructure that's being built, certain areas within a PID might require a higher level or higher expense to develop. They may get charged with a special assessment because it's more there's more public infrastructure in that portion of the PID versus other areas. So it's a way of equalizing.
Yeah, so Jerry's plan is there's a bunch of commercial up front and there's been some residential in the back.
Yeah.
The residential might not cost very much to develop, so
Yeah.
all the commercial up front pays for
Yeah,
80% of it.
Yeah, so it's getting paid through both property taxes and maybe a special assessment on just the commercial area.
Right.
And that's basically the preliminary financial analysis summary that you've submitted in here, right? That's
Yes.
basically how you're breaking that down.
Yeah,
Can I ask a question
sure.
also? I'm just wondering on there, in addition to the mill levy, the special assessment, and then it says in here that the district should also have the option to utilize the CPACE financing. Can you tell us about the clean energy element of that?
Yeah, I probably can't tell you a whole lot because I'm not an expert on CPACE financing, but it's something that is, it's a fairly new financial tool that is available to commercial real estate development projects. We actually have one client, the Black Desert Project in Ivans, obtained a very large CPACE bond to help with their project, in addition to the bonds that they issued through their PID.
Is there a clean energy element to this development so far, or you just want the option for the future?
I included it just to have the option.
Okay.
Jerry would have to address whether there's any plans for that. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But anyway, the other point I wanted to make on the assessments is we've proposed that the 7.5 million would be a cap for both the mill levy and the assessments. So we're not saying 7.5 million through property taxes and then assessments on top of that, just to make sure that's clear. The CPACE bonding, on the other hand, would be outside of that, is what we're proposing. So those are the main points. I mean, this is just to be totally honest, is a fairly straightforward project. I don't think that there's any unusual or unexpected infrastructure that's looking to be financed here. We're talking about roads and utilities, and I think those could be seen probably in the engineer's estimate, which I think has probably already been shared with the city. Yeah.
Can you give me an example of the special assessment? I need to, what would be an example of how a special assessment would?
Yeah, let's see. It's not used as frequently, at least in my experience, as property taxes, but we do have a few PIDs that have used it. One example is the Coral Junction PID, which is actually also in Hurricane. It's right at the freeway interchange. What's the main exit to Hurricane? It's exit, I can't remember the number all of a sudden, but
16.
exit 16. At exit 16. It's a purely commercial project. And because it was purely, as I understand it, purely a tool for structuring the financing. That the underwriters who were advising the PID just basically said, look, we can get you better bonding if you do a portion of it through property taxes and a portion of it through assessments. And so there was a portion of the total debt cap that was allocated to property taxes. And then that property tax was levied on all the properties. And then there was a portion of it that was allocated to special assessments. And that was assessed against those parcels, recorded, an ordinance was adopted by the PID. It was recorded against all those parcels. And the first assessment actually becomes due in that particular PID on December 1st of this year. So the first assessments, and it's an annual assessment for 20 years.
And they used it for what?
Infrastructure.
So
Yeah.
just
Water line.
another way to pay for
Exactly.
the infrastructure out of the PID.
Yeah, roads, utilities. They had a lot of earthwork to do there associated with getting the roads in.
Okay.
That was part of the cost. Nothing crazy.
Okay. So it's just another way to spread out the,
Just another
Money.
tool. Yeah.
okay.
Bonds
Yeah.
issued by a PID, they gotta be, there's gotta be a revenue source to borrow against.
Right.
And it's either property tax or special assessments is the revenue source.
Yeah.
So in our packet, there's a number, like the engineer's estimate of just the number, but is there an actual estimate in there? Does anybody see that or?
I didn't see it, really.
I think I have that. I have what Jerry has shared with me.
Because that estimate is basically going to break down your
Yeah.
infrastructure, where the money's going, right? That's going to be the itemized thing of where you're.
Jerry, you
exactly
have
what
Bush
I
and
was
Gudgel
talking
do it?
Yeah.
Did Bush?
No,
Who-
Northern Engineering.
Alpha.
Was it Northern or?
No.
I thought
Northern
it was-
Engineering did this part. Alpha Engineering did our other one.
Okay. I'm sure they can provide it if that's requested of the city.
So what are we looking for here tonight? We're talking about doing another PID.
Well,
With
my question is with this one's in front of us before we have,
Right.
the new guidance or the new resolution. Do we want to table this and wait for the new resolution? Or is this
Well, I don't
one
know if
simple
I
enough,
don't.
or is there anything in this one that makes us worried about the other issues?
We don't have a moratorium on PIDs. I don't know if we can make someone,
Not a moratorium.
I know, but I'm saying I don't know how does that, we don't,
can't, I don't think you can apply that,
right.
what we're working on.
they've
to
already
this,
applied
depending on when the application
For a
was
PID
submitted.
before we changed our
That's
resolution.
my question. Like, do we?
Yeah.
Well, and
Keith, what's the rule on that?
maybe I can address that
Yeah.
while he's thinking about a response. But as much as I would love to have this approved tonight, actually, there's a couple things that we need to have in place. One is there has to be a public hearing and prior notice of that. And then there's,
Yeah, I didn't think we were gonna, I just want to know what our next step is.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
okay.
You
Yeah,
know, we're
so-
not, we talked, it says possible action. I know we can't vote on it tonight, but
yeah,
if we're going to move forward with it, I don't want to see you guys spend a bunch of time and money if we're not positively thinking about it,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, no, the next steps would be a public hearing and an
Yeah.
adoption of a resolution, but how that interacts with your proposed policy, I'd defer to Heath on that. So.
I would just indicate that we need to get this policy, in place, and whether we apply it in this situation or everything going forward, that's up to the council to make that decision. Whether it's going to, now, if you're asking me, can we assert some sort of like pending ordinance doctrine? This is not an ordinance.
No.
It's a resolution. It's a policy. and we intentionally did it that way as a policy, so that I don't know that it is definitive or required on us, and so I don't think we could assert that. But I think that Jerry can appreciate looking, I know his council's looked at our policy in this resolution, and I think that he's trying to articulate some of the reasons why there may be conditions that would warrant a deviation from our policy. And I think where he's going at, this is basically commercial, and because of its location and stuff like that, and because of our general plan that has always identified Anderson Junction as being more of a commercial center, those are the things that I think they're trying to say, we think this warrants, well, I'm not going to put words in their mouth, but I think that's what I heard from
Yeah.
them.
If Matt won't say it, I will.
Okay.
This project warrants a bid.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the PIDs come directly to the council and doesn't go through the planning commission or anything like that, correct? Okay.
Here.
Okay.
I think the action that you can make a decision on today is whether you want to move forward with having staff set a public hearing. And even at the conclusion of the public hearing, you still have the ability to
Same.
reject or accept. And you do that in the form of a resolution. Matt can probably help us with the form of a resolution accepting, just like you did on Pine View, and walk us through that process.
That's for the resolution on the PID. What are we going to do with the
Well, I'm going to have
number 8?
Believe me,
That's number 8.
believe me, I think that we need to, at the same time we're having the same meeting, we're having a public hearing, we probably ought to be dealing with our policy and deal with it either before or after. I'm not saying that we're going to have to judge. I'm not requesting or suggesting that you need to cite to a new policy that we're going to adopt as the reason for accepting or rejecting. I don't think that we can or should, because their petition was in before we even started this concept, but I think that we need to have one in place. We can reference it and say, yeah, we think, but their application should stand on its own, and we should continue to uniformly look to our policy each time we get future requests.
Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly, it's the end of a long meeting. If there would be a possibility of, let's start the public hearing, I feel like where our project is located and the benefits and the requirements that it's having to carry is an ideal place for that project. Just as 25 years ago, we did a special improvement district and built a water tank, and I paid for water mains going over there, and I paid for sewer lines. This is the time for this to happen. So if we wouldn't, if we could just have staff advertise, get our public hearing notices going so that we can at least be, time is of the essence on this, I feel. So that's my put. Any questions on the project? Thank
Oh,
you.
good. Thanks, Jerry. All right, I will entertain a motion.
I don't think there's a motion to be made, Mayor. I
Well,
think just direction to be given to move forward with it.
You can do it in the form of a motion or just straight direction to staff.
Motion? I wouldn't mind.
I like motions.
Yeah.
It's just a motion.
Mayor, I'd move that we move forward with the public hearing and moving forward with the forming of the Boulder Ridge Public Infrastructure District process.
Perfect. I have a motion
I'll second that.
and a second. Any further discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We are,
Thank you, guys.
thank you.
Matt, maybe before that, if you could provide the engineer's estimate of cost and maybe a specimen of your governing dock,
Is that-
just to look at.
is that the one you sent me? You got it, yes. I can get it.
Okay, well, let's just get it into SharePoint. So,
So then all you'll be waiting for is Matt's documents, correct?
yeah.
Can I just ask in terms of schedule, and I can look this up and figure it out, but city council meetings coming up.
Yeah,
Looking at-
let's, if it was going to be on next council, because we have a 10,
It's actually a 2 week.
It's
oh, it's
For
2
this.
weeks for this. So we're not going to be able to get it on our second
October-
meeting. It's going to
October
be,
3rd.
it's going to be the October 3rd
Okay.
meeting.
That's
And
whatever that
so
is.
for October, 2 weeks before October 3rd is going to 20th.
We'll plan to get you all that information.
Okay.
Okay.
Matt's going to work late a couple nights and he'll get that to us.
All right, well, that is all of our business items tonight. We have our calendar of events. First off, on Thursday, September 14th, 7 p.m., we have our emergency preparedness meeting here in the Old Town Hall. I've got JD who's going to signs, and we'll get that advertised. We have our fall community cleanup Friday, September 15th through Monday, September 18th. That means we'll have dumpsters through our regular areas that we've always had dumpsters. We have our neighborhood market, our September 16th. It's 9 a.m. So we'll have this one and one more in October. Then our our second annual Tocqueville City Halloween Trunk or Treat will be on Saturday, October 28th, 2023. And we're going to hold that in the parking lot behind the church. So we will, from now on, we'll be having this the Saturday before Halloween. So we don't mess up anybody's Halloween activities on the evening, but it was a great activity last year. We had a big turnout, so we hope it grows every year. And just remind everybody, everything is free of charge for this. There will be no booths that are selling anything. It's just a time for the city to get together and mingle and have a good time. I think that's all of our calendar of events.
Computer or community readiness on the 14th.
Yes, I started with that. So, all right. I think, are we going to move into we need a closed session
We
this
do.
evening. So we will take a 5-minute recess for this portion of the meeting. So you guys can't stay. I guess I need a motion
Well, do you want to we can make the motion when we
after
convene
you
in 5
convene. Yes.
minutes.
So in 5 minutes, we'll be back in here for our closed session. So you don't have to go home, just got to go somewhere else.